So guys, to continue where we left off, we already discussed, I already discussed the 8 different kinds of clauses we have. Now there's another aspect that I would like you to consider, and it is the positioning of adverb clauses. Most adverb clauses can be placed either at the beginning of a sentence or after the main clause, the independent clause. If again we are talking about only two clauses, a dependent and an independent one. Remember that a sentence can have several clauses, right? We have different constructions of sentences, like a compound complex sentence, a complex sentence. All of these, they allow us to have different clauses in only one sentence. So my point is, if we place the adverb clause before the independent clause, we need to place a comma, and most adverb clauses allow this. There are some adverb clauses that cannot be placed at the beginning of the sentence, however. For example, we have the case of adverb clauses of comparison. Adverb clauses of comparison cannot be placed at the beginning of the sentence for obvious reasons, right? We can also have the case of I cannot think of any other right now. Possibly adverb clauses of manner cannot be placed at the beginning of the sentence either. So if you're going to place the adverb clause at the beginning, don't forget the comma. This is what we call fronting. Okay, this is fronting a structure. We front a structure to bring special attention to this section of the sentence. In other words, we want people to pay more attention to the adverb clause, right? It brings a special emphasis to whatever piece of information we begin the sentence with. Then don't forget that if we are going to place, however, the adverb clause after the independent section, we do not use a comma, okay? And it is perfectly correct to use them both ways. Just remember that by fronting the adverb clause, you want to bring special attention to this piece of information for your reader. A note on the use of the phrase by the time that. The phrase by the time that introduces an adverb clause of time, right? And we need to bear in mind that we need to make some let me see if I find here it is. Here we go. We need to make some changes in the verb forms, right? If you use by the time that with present, the other section of the sentence is going to be using a future perfect. For example, by the time that he accepts the truth, it will have been too late to save his relationship. You don't want to use future perfect? You don't really have to use future perfect. You can simply use also future, right? By the time he realized the truth, now I'm using past, right? By the time he realized the truth, it had already been too late. His wife had left him, right? So we can do this. We can play with the tenses. If we have achieved proper mastery of the English language at this moment in our majors, you guys have been studying English for basically 3 years, right? For basically 3 years, and you have already covered your advanced English level. So you should be speaking at the level of B2, C1, something like that. I expect your level to be according to the Common European Framework of Reference, right? But anyway, let's continue with the topic. So we need to make those changes. We need to play with these tense shifts when we are working with by the time that, right? And these mixtures, these shifts of the verbs, do not necessarily obey these two, right? Like present, future perfect. No, you can use present and simply future. You can use past and past perfect, or you don't necessarily need to use the perfective form either, okay? Just bear that in mind. We have the case of so that to express purpose, right, is used also commonly with modals. For example, we can consider that in future we can use can, will, and may. In past we can use could, would, and might with so that, right? I will tell him I did it so that he won't punish you. I called so that she wouldn't think that I didn't care, right? So we play with the tenses as well. Again, this is going to be instinctive if you have already developed your English mastery properly, right? And I need you to consider always the context, people. You always need to check the context because some subordinators overlap. Remember in the previous video I told you this, some subordinators overlap, and you need to consider the context because otherwise you may not be able to identify the kind of clause correctly. Remember that again, because these words overlap, these subordinating conjunctions may overlap, some of them, right? If you don't pay attention to the context, you may simply say, it's an adverb clause that starts with as, so it's an adverb clause of time. No, I've told you, we don't go automatic here. We are not driving an automatic car. We are working with a manual car, right? It's a manual and you need to get the gears, just paying attention to what you are doing. Now, check this example. As Maurice opened the door, the dog ran out. What kind of clause is that? Is it an adverb clause of time? Or is it an adverb clause of cause? With this information, we cannot tell for sure if it's an adverb clause of time or if it's an adverb clause of cause. That's why we need to check the context. Now read the sentence with its context. As Maurice opened the door, the dog ran out. It seems he did it on purpose. He's always trying to piss me off. Now it's different. Now we have some basis to consider if this adverb clause is an adverb clause of time or an adverb clause of cause, right? Because the context says that it seems that he did it on purpose and that this guy Maurice, is always trying to piss me off. So it hints that there may be a causality in the dog running out when Maurice opened the door, right? So we can figure out it is an adverb clause of cause with the context. Is it not a clause? Always bear in mind, guys, that adverb clauses must have three basic elements in them. We need to have the connecting word, right? We need to have this connecting word. We need to have a subject and we need to have a verb, okay? Those are the basic elements. Of course, in the predicate, we can have a direct object. We can also have an object complement or an indirect object. We can have a predicate nominative, a predicate adjective. We can have adverbs. We can have many other elements, but the basic elements that must be contained in an adverb clause is the connecting word, the subject, and the verb. So, is it not a clause? I asked this question because I want you to check the following cases. Not a clause. Before the accident, Stanley was texting. Before the accident, Stanley was texting. Adverb clause of time. No, hold your horses. That is not an adverb clause of time. Does this phrase provide an idea of time? For sure, that's undeniable. But I cannot say that this is an adverb clause of time because it doesn't have the basic elements. See? We have, let's say, the subordinating conjunction. Let's say we have the subordinating conjunction. We have a subject, but where is the verb? Teacher, the verb was texting. No, nobody. This cannot be the verb because this is the verb for Stanley, right? Stanley was texting. This is the verb for the independent part. Where is the verb for this part? We do not have one, so we cannot say that this is an adverb clause of time. What's more, if you check on the dictionary, you will find that the word before, and I want you to remember this concept that I taught to you when we were coursing English Grammar 1, which is the principle of conversion, of the polysemy of the different words in the language. In other words, a word can have several different meanings, and as a result, a word can assume different parts of a speech, right? So, in the case of before is, of course, it is a subordinating conjunction, no doubt about that. But it can also be a preposition, right? It can be a subordinating conjunction, it can be a preposition, it can also be an adverb, you see? So, because it can have these different roles, because there's this polysemy in meaning. Obviously, polysemy has to do with meaning, different meanings, right? So, in this case, this is not a subordinating conjunction, this happens to be a preposition. So this is a prepositional phrase. Once Marvin performed in front of 2,000 people. Again, this is not an adverb clause because we don't have the verb for once. And if you tell me, hey, you know what, teacher? Yes, we have a verb for once. You see, we have the subject and we have the verb. So yeah, this is an adverb clause of time, right? And I will tell you, yeah, you're close, but it seems you forgot about the detail that an adverb clause is a kind of dependent clause, and dependent clauses need to be part of an independent section. There is no possibility that an independent clause can make sense unless we have already established a common antecedent for the clause, right? And that applies basically for oral communication. But in academic communication, in academic writing, we cannot do this. So this is not really an adverb clause of time. This is simply an adverb. Once is working as an adverb, yes? And I think I am going to have to continue explaining this to you in the next video because we're almost out of time for this one, okay? So I'll be back to you in the next video on this topic.